The plane door hissed open like a curtain rising. Dorothy gripped the seat backs as she shuffled down the aisle, her silver scarf tucked neat, her smile polite. Robert followed, careful, dignified, a principal's posture inside a tired body. Between them walked Kelly, 12, bright-eyed, carrying a folder of medical notes as if it were a shield. Then came the voice that bent the mood sideways. "Mama, economy is that way." The flight attendant's smile didn't reach her eyes. A few passengers looked up. The woman's badge read Monica. Her tone read assumption. Dorothy paused. "We're in 15C, D, and E." Monica nodded at the rear. "You'll want the back." The emphasis landed like a shove. Robert checked the paper again, hands trembling from nerves more than age. Kelly watched Monica's face for mercy and found a smirk instead. The aisle bottlenecked. Monica clapped lightly, as if calling a class to order. "Let's move it. We have a schedule." A businessman sighed. A toddler whined. Dorothy's knee twinged. "I'll need the aisle seat, please," she said. "Arthritis." Monica tilted her head. "Special requests need advance notice." The words were correct. The tone was punishment. Robert set his bag overhead with the slowness of someone measuring every motion. "Sir," Monica said louder, "we do expect basic readiness." The doctor in row 6 glanced over. A white-haired couple in row 3 whispered. Kelly's throat burned. She had practiced kindness her grandparents' way. She had not practiced this. They reached row 15 at last. Monica studied their passes like counterfeit bills. "Are you sure this isn't a mix-up?" Her gaze swept them, then the seats, then them again. "We can't have people blocking the aisle." Her voice carried. It wanted witnesses. Dorothy inhaled. 50 years of classrooms had taught her how to hold steady when someone tried to make you small. "These are our seats." She sat with a soft wince. Kelly slid in beside her, still clutching the folder. Doctor names, medication times, questions she had written in careful print. Robert hesitated in the aisle, overwhelmed by the closeness, by the eyes. "Robert," Dorothy coaxed, "here." He nodded, lowered himself, missed the armrest by an inch. "Monica, it's Ged. If you need assistance, we can deplane you." The threat was sugar-coated, the message wasn't. A hint of something cruel crept in next, so quiet it could pretend to be a joke. "Is it just me?" Monica murmured toward a coworker. "Or did someone forget a shower?" Kelly heard it. The doctor in row 6 heard it. The air changed temperature. Kelly felt 2 histories at once. 1. The day she met these people who chose her when no one did. 2. Every store, every sidewalk, every restaurant where her grandparents were asked to prove they belonged. She had promised herself to be brave when the day arrived. She had hoped it wouldn't be today. Dorothy pressed the call button. "May I use the restroom before pushback?" "We're boarding," Monica replied. "You'll need to wait." Dorothy nodded, the kind of nod you give when someone holds the door and then lets it swing shut. Robert's confusion deepened. "Dottie, did we do something wrong?" Kelly squeezed his hand. "No, Grandpa." A white-haired man in row 3 shifted, uneasy. The businessman pretended to read. The cabin hummed with quiet math. "If I say something, will it delay us? If I say nothing, am I part of it?" Monica turned down the aisle again. "Basic instructions aren't complicated," she announced, not to anyone and to everyone at once. Something inside Kelly aligned. The folder on her lap was more than paper. It was proof. Proof of appointments, diagnoses, urgency. Proof that slowness had a reason, that dignity had a name. She stood, not with a stomp, with the stillness of someone done asking permission to exist. "Excuse me," she said. The single bell note of her voice cut through the cabin hum. Monica froze. A few phones lifted. "You're speaking about my parents," Kelly continued, steady. "You don't get to humiliate them." Monica blinked. "Your parents." The word snagged on her disbelief. "They adopted me," Kelly said, chin level. "I'm 12. I know what respect is." The doctor in row 6 lowered her mask. The judge in row 3 leaned forward. History bent closer to the aisle. Kelly didn't shout. She itemized. "You told my grandmother to go to economy before you checked her ticket. You mocked my grandfather for moving slowly while we're flying for a neurological consult. You denied a bathroom request my grandmother made because of arthritis and diabetes. And you implied we smell." Her voice didn't waver. Her hands shook only after each sentence landed. Monica's smile tightened, all policy and no empathy. "Young lady, this is not how we address crew." Kelly held her gaze. Maybe it should be how we address cruelty. A murmur swelled. The doctor spoke first. I'm a physician. The restroom delay could be harmful. The white-haired man added. I've flown 50 years. I've never seen this tone used on anyone else. The businessman closed his laptop. This is not customer service. This is contempt. Monica opened her mouth, then shut it as the purser approached from the galley, alerted by the soundless alarm of a cabin that had decided to care. Kelly stepped back, breathing, her fingers loosening on the folder. Dorothy reached for her granddaughter's hand. Robert lifted his chin the half-inch that says I remember who I am. Outside the window, the tug nudged the plane into position. Inside, something more important shifted. The center of gravity, from silence to witness, from bystander to ally, from shame to truth. The cabin had gone still. The only sound was the faint rumble of the engines warming beneath them. Monica's eyes darted toward the front where her supervisor stood, alerted by the sudden hush spreading like a wave. Return to your seat, she ordered Kelly, voice brittle. Kelly didn't move. Not until you stop embarrassing my family. Every passenger nearby could feel the air tighten. Dorothy tried to pull her granddaughter down gently. Sweetheart, it's all right, she whispered. But it wasn't. Not anymore. A man in row 12 lifted his phone, recording silently. Others followed. They weren't sure why, but something in that young girl's composure demanded witnesses. Monica straightened her jacket. Ma'am, you're creating a disturbance, she told Dorothy coldly. If you can't control your child, we'll have you removed before takeoff. That did it. The hush broke into a low buzz of disbelief. The elderly judge near the front removed his glasses. Excuse me, he said evenly, but I've been observing this entire exchange, and the only disturbance I've seen has come from your behavior, not theirs. Monica froze. Her authority, once absolute in the narrow aisle, began to slip. Sir, I'm only enforcing policy. Policy, the judge said, standing now. Since when does policy include humiliation? Robert, still confused, looked between them all. We just need to get to Los Angeles, he murmured, voice trembling. Kelly knelt beside him, squeezing his hand. We will, Grandpa. I promise. Dorothy straightened, tired but firm. This trip is for his medical appointment, she explained quietly. We can't afford to miss it. Her calm dignity silenced the whispers. The doctor from row 6 finally stood. I'm Dr. Kim, she said, holding up her ID. This gentleman clearly has cognitive issues. The stress you're causing him could worsen his condition. I'm documenting this. Monica's cheeks flushed crimson. You have no right. I have every right as a physician to report abuse of elderly passengers, Dr. Kim cut in. Now Monica's veneer cracked. Fine, she said tightly. If everyone's against me, I'll have the captain handle it. But before she could storm away, Kelly's voice, small but unwavering, stopped her. My grandfather fought for people like you to have a job you don't respect, she said. And my grandmother spent 40 years teaching children who didn't believe they could learn, until she showed them they could. You should be ashamed to treat teachers like that. The line landed like thunder in miniature. One of the other flight attendants, Jennifer, stepped forward hesitantly. Monica, she murmured. Maybe just give them a moment. Monica shot her a glare. Stay out of this. Jennifer didn't. No, she said. I've been watching too. It's wrong. The chain of silence snapped. A ripple of agreement rolled through the cabin, soft voices rising in support. The businessman called out, they deserve respect. Someone clapped. Another added, you can't talk to people like that anymore. Monica's authority collapsed under the weight of collective conscience. She stepped back, speechless, while passengers began speaking to the Hendersons with compassion, offering water, shifting bags, asking if Dorothy needed help. Kelly exhaled, trembling now that the adrenaline was fading. Dorothy brushed a tear from her cheek. You were brave, baby, she whispered. So brave. Robert blinked at her, half smiling. Did we win? Kelly nodded through tears. Not yet, Grandpa. But they're listening now. The supervisor arrived moments later, tablet in hand, confusion already on his face from the passenger complaints streaming in. What's going on here? He asked sharply. Half the cabin pointed toward Monica. The story poured out, dozens of voices overlapping. The insult, the mockery, the smell comment, the seat questioning. Evidence on phones. Footage from multiple angles. Kelly stood again, calm despite shaking hands. Sir, We're just trying to get to Los Angeles for my grandfather's medical test. We didn't ask for any of this." The supervisor watched her for a long moment. "I believe you," he said finally, then turned to Monica. "You're relieved from this flight. Step aside." A collective breath of relief filled the plane. Monica's lips parted to argue, but the sight of every passenger watching her, not one in her corner, silenced the words before they formed. She turned and walked briskly toward the galley, her once crisp stride faltering. The supervisor crouched beside Robert. "Sir, I'm very sorry. You and your family will be cared for the rest of this flight. That's a promise." Kelly nodded politely, but didn't smile. Some damage couldn't be undone midair. The plane's engines roared to life. The wheels rolled, and as they lifted into the clouds, Kelly rested her head on Dorothy's shoulder. The phone cameras were off now, but hearts weren't. Every person on that flight would remember the girl who stood up when no one else did, and the quiet power of dignity reclaiming its place. The next morning, the world woke up to Kelly's voice echoing across millions of screens. A passenger had uploaded the full video, 4 minutes of calm courage that shook an entire industry. Within hours, it was everywhere. Hashtag Kelly defends her family. Hashtag airline racism exposed. Hashtag dignity in the sky. The footage showed everything. The smirk, the smell comment, the humiliation, and then the moment when a 12-year-old stood up with a voice steadier than the adults around her. Clips were replayed on morning shows, reaction videos flooded TikTok, and news anchors spoke her name like she was a symbol. Kelly Henderson, the little girl who refused to stay silent. At the Hendersons' small home in Memphis, the phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, social workers, adoption advocates, and old students who once called Robert, Principal Henderson, all wanted to speak. Dorothy sat on the couch, hand on her husband's knee, stunned by how fast the world could change. Robert looked at the screen with tired eyes. "Are they angry?" he asked softly. "No, love," Dorothy said. "They're proud." Across the country, American Airlines headquarters was in chaos. The PR department had been flooded with emails and calls. Stock prices trembled. Executives watched the video in silence, each frame heavier than the last. Monica's behavior wasn't just bad, it was viral bad. The kind that sparks lawsuits, protests, and corporate reform. The Vice President of Customer Relations, David Rodriguez, issued a public statement before noon. "We are deeply ashamed of what occurred on Flight 1247. The passengers involved did nothing wrong. We are taking immediate action to ensure such discrimination never happens again." It wasn't enough. Viewers wanted more than apologies, they wanted change. Meanwhile, Kelly sat quietly in her grandparents' kitchen, writing in her notebook. Her grandmother noticed. "What are you doing, baby?" "Making a list," Kelly said, "of everything they need to fix." Her handwriting was small but determined. "Train staff about elderly passengers. Teach empathy, not authority. Stop mocking people who move slowly. Always believe the witnesses." Dorothy smiled, tears softening her eyes. "That's my girl." By afternoon, a news van parked outside. The journalist was polite, cautious not to intrude. "Mrs. Henderson, the world wants to hear your side. Would you be willing to share?" Dorothy hesitated, then nodded. "If it helps someone else, yes." The interview went live that evening. Dorothy spoke softly, describing how her husband had fought for civil rights in the 60s, how age had slowed his mind, but not his heart. Then she looked straight into the camera. "We didn't raise Kelly to fight. We raised her to stand up, with grace." That clip became the emotional centerpiece of every news cycle that week. Even celebrities reposted it. "This little girl taught the world about courage," one caption read. At school, Kelly tried to stay normal. She walked through hallways where teachers smiled and classmates whispered her name. Some called her the Justice Girl. One boy asked, "Aren't you scared to talk to adults like that?" Kelly shrugged. "Not when they're wrong." The story kept growing. Civil rights organizations reached out, asking if the Hendersons would speak at conferences. Adoption groups praised them for showing how love transcends age. Even lawmakers took notice. Discussions began about creating clearer protections for elderly and disabled passengers. But not everyone was celebrating. Monica Torres, the flight attendant, faced public outrage. Her name trended for all the wrong reasons. She released a statement claiming she had been misunderstood, that the video didn't show the full story. The internet wasn't buying it. Every angle of her cruelty had been recorded. Back in Memphis, Kelly turned off her phone. The attention was overwhelming. Dorothy stroked her hair. You did what was right. But remember, justice isn't about noise. It's about what changes after. Kelly nodded. Then we're not done yet. The next week, an envelope arrived, an official invitation from American Airlines. They wanted the family to fly again, first class, to Dallas, where the CEO would issue a formal apology in person. Dorothy frowned at the letter. I don't know, Kelly. Feels like a publicity stunt. Kelly thought for a moment. Maybe. But if we go, we can tell them exactly what to fix. Robert smiled faintly. That's my advocate. And so they packed again. Carefully, calmly, as if stepping back into the storm they had already survived once. Only this time, they weren't just passengers. They were a symbol, a family that turned pain into purpose. As their new flight climbed into the golden horizon, Kelly looked out the window. Below her, the clouds stretched like peace itself. Beside her, Dorothy rested her hand over Robert's, steady and sure. For the first time since that awful morning, Kelly allowed herself to breathe. They hadn't just won a fight in the sky. They had begun a movement on the ground. The Henderson family stepped into the bright lobby of American Airlines headquarters in Dallas. Cameras flashed, journalists whispered, and executives lined up with polite, uneasy smiles. The CEO himself waited at the end of the corridor, hand extended, voice rehearsed. Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, Kelly, thank you for coming. We owe you more than an apology. Kelly stood close to her grandparents, clutching Dorothy's hand. The room felt too polished, too careful, like an apology wrapped in glass. Reporters aimed their lenses, hoping to catch a perfect moment of forgiveness. But Kelly hadn't come for photos. She had come for answers. Inside the conference room, the CEO began the speech everyone expected. What happened on Flight 1247 does not reflect our values. The employee involved has been terminated, and we are implementing new training programs immediately. Dorothy listened silently, nodding but unsmiling. Robert sat beside her, lost but calm, his fingers tracing the table's edge. Kelly leaned forward. Sir, she said softly but firmly, training isn't enough. People know how to act. They just don't care until they're caught. The room went still. Executives exchanged glances. The CEO blinked. What do you suggest? Kelly opened a folder she'd prepared, typed notes, printed pages, highlighted lines. I made a list, she said. Start with empathy. Teach your crew what respect looks like when no one is recording. Create a hotline for passengers who face discrimination. And have people like my grandparents teach it. People who actually know what prejudice feels like. The silence that followed was heavy, the kind that fills a room when truth lands harder than expected. Dorothy smiled faintly. You see why we let her handle the speeches. The CEO's expression softened. You're right, Kelly. You all are. And we want your help. He gestured toward a screen where new policy drafts were already displayed. The title read the Henderson Protocol, Passenger Dignity Initiative. Kelly blinked in surprise. You named it after us? We did, he said. And if you agree, we'd like your family to help us build it. For the first time, Dorothy's eyes brightened with pride instead of exhaustion. Then let's make it count. A press conference followed. Cameras rolled as the CEO addressed the nation. Today, we begin a new chapter in our company's history, one inspired by courage. A 12-year-old girl reminded us that respect is not a policy, it's a duty. The Henderson Protocol will ensure every passenger, regardless of age, race, or health, travels with dignity. Applause filled the hall. Kelly's cheeks flushed, but she didn't smile for the cameras. She was thinking of her grandfather, whose steady hand had once guided her to believe in quiet strength, and of her grandmother, whose patience had turned her anger into purpose. Later that evening, away from the lights, they sat together at the hotel, the city glowing beneath them. Robert sipped tea slowly. All this fuss, he murmured. For us. Kelly nodded. For everyone who ever got treated like they didn't belong. Dorothy placed her arm around her granddaughter. You turned shame into change, baby. That's power used right. But not everyone in the airline world was pleased. Emails leaked from staff unions, some flight attendants complaining that Monica's punishment was too harsh, that the airline was bowing to social pressure. Kelly read one of the articles quietly. Grandma, they still don't get it. Dorothy sighed. Change never starts with everyone agreeing. It starts with one person refusing to back down. By the next week, News networks were calling Kelly the girl who changed the sky. Documentaries were being planned, podcasts recording interviews, and schools inviting her to speak about advocacy and courage. Yet Kelly stayed grounded. She still did her homework, still helped her grandfather organize his medicine, still walked her grandmother to church every Sunday. But inside her heart, something had shifted. The world no longer felt too big for her voice. One morning, she opened her inbox to find an email from the Department of Transportation. They wanted her testimony for a new federal bill protecting elderly and disabled travelers, the Passenger Dignity Act. Dorothy read it aloud, eyes wide. They want you to speak in Washington? Kelly nodded slowly. Grandpa always said education is what changes laws. Maybe this is how we keep his lessons alive. Robert looked up, a flicker of his old clarity returning. Then speak for all of us, darling. Speak loud. That night, as the city lights twinkled beneath their hotel window, Kelly promised herself something. She would not just be the girl who stood up once on a plane. She would be the girl who never stopped. The world had seen what she could do when defending her family. Now, she would defend families everywhere. The marble floors of Capitol Hill echoed under Kelly's small shoes. She was 12, clutching a binder thicker than her arm, standing in front of cameras and senators twice her grandparents' age. Reporters whispered as she walked past, "That's her. The girl from the flight." Dorothy stood behind her, one hand on Robert's arm, the other holding Kelly's shoulder steady. The old man's eyes were soft but proud. "Remember," he whispered, "you're not speaking for us anymore. You're speaking for everyone who can't." The hearing room filled quickly. Lawmakers, journalists, activists, airline executives, all waiting for the child who had made a nation rethink respect. The chairman adjusted his microphone. "We now call Miss Kelly Henderson to testify." Kelly took a breath, stepped to the microphone, and began. "Good morning. My name is Kelly Henderson. I'm 12 years old, and 5 months ago, my grandparents and I boarded a plane to Los Angeles for my grandfather's medical appointment. We expected a safe trip. Instead, we were humiliated." The room fell silent. Her voice was calm, unshaking. "A flight attendant mocked my grandparents' age, questioned if they belonged in their seats, and made racist comments. I spoke up because silence felt like approval. I didn't plan to go viral. I just wanted them treated like people." Senators leaned forward. One of them asked gently, "What do you hope will change, Miss Henderson?" Kelly flipped open her binder. Pages full of handwritten notes and data from passengers who'd reached out after her story. People wrote to me from all over the country. Disabled veterans, single mothers, elderly travelers who were told they were too slow. I realized our story wasn't rare. It was just recorded. She looked up. "That's why we need the Passenger Dignity Act, to make sure respect isn't optional." A murmur spread through the chamber. Reporters scribbled. One senator nodded slowly. Dorothy's eyes shimmered with tears as she watched her granddaughter, the same girl who once hid behind her on the first day of school, now commanding a room full of lawmakers. Kelly continued, her tone both gentle and fierce. "My grandfather spent his life teaching others not to give up. My grandmother spent 40 years helping children who couldn't walk or speak. They taught me to answer cruelty with clarity, not anger. I'm asking you to do the same. Make laws that protect people before the next flight, not after another video goes viral." The applause that followed wasn't loud at first, just a ripple. But then it grew, filling the room until the chairman had to gavel for silence. When Kelly sat down, Dorothy squeezed her hand. "You did it, baby." Kelly whispered, "No, Grandma. We did." That night, the news channels exploded again. 12-year-old civil rights advocate moves Congress to tears. Her testimony became the most replayed clip on social media. Hashtags resurfaced. Hashtag Kelly for Justice. Hashtag Dignity in the Sky. Hashtag The Henderson Effect. Talk shows invited her. Universities requested her speech for ethics programs. Even major airlines released synchronized statements supporting the bill, afraid of being the next viral villain. Meanwhile, Robert's condition was worsening. He forgot dates, sometimes names, but never pride. One evening, as Kelly helped him with his medication, he smiled faintly. "Did you fix the skies yet?" "Not yet," Kelly said, holding his hand. "But we're closer." Weeks later, Congress passed the Passenger Dignity Act with overwhelming support. The law required anti-discrimination training for all airline staff, medical awareness certification, and immediate review systems for complaints involving elderly or disabled passengers. When the president signed it, Kelly and her grandparents were invited to the ceremony. Cameras flashed as the pen glided across the paper. Reporters shouted her name. Kelly didn't wave. She simply smiled at her grandparents, her heroes. Afterward, the president knelt slightly to her height. "You reminded this country what courage looks like," he said. "Not anger. Courage." The photo of that moment went viral again. A small girl, standing between two elderly figures, holding the signed act that bore their story's name. Back home in Memphis, banners appeared at schools, "Stand like Kelly." Students studied her hearing as part of a social awareness project. Teachers played her speech before assemblies. But Kelly didn't chase fame. She went back to debate club, back to her quiet desk, back to helping her grandmother cook dinner. What had changed wasn't her life. It was her sense of purpose. Dorothy often watched her from the doorway, heart full. "You turned our pain into law," she whispered one night. "That's what your grandpa always dreamed of." Kelly looked at the old photos on the shelf, Robert as a young principal, Dorothy with her classroom of smiling children. "Then I just finished what he started." Outside, thunder rolled over Memphis, soft and distant. Kelly opened her window and whispered into the night. "For every person still waiting to be treated right, we're not done yet." 5 years later, the skies were calmer, and so was the world that had once watched a 12-year-old stand up for justice at 30,000 feet. Kelly Henderson was now 17, taller, more poised, but still carried the same quiet fire in her eyes. Her name had become a symbol of courage. Teachers quoted her. Activists cited her. And somewhere in Memphis, her grandparents still began every morning with coffee, pride, and gratitude. The Passenger Dignity Act had changed everything. Airlines now began every employee's training with a simple video. Kelly's confrontation on Flight 1247. Her steady voice saying, "You don't get to humiliate them," had become a lesson across the travel industry. Complaints of discrimination on flights dropped by more than half. Airlines added empathy programs, medical awareness courses, and clear protocols for elderly care. The Henderson Protocol was now law, not suggestion. Kelly often received letters, thousands of them, from strangers. A veteran thanking her for protecting his right to travel with oxygen tanks. A wheelchair user writing that attendants now helped without judgment. A foster child saying her story gave him hope that family wasn't about blood, but love. At home, life was quieter but deeper. Robert's memory had faded, but his spirit never left. Sometimes he'd ask, "Did you ever make it to Washington, darling?" And Dorothy would smile gently. She did more than that, love. She changed the law. Dorothy herself had slowed down, but still carried that teacher's spark. She had started a foundation, the Henderson Hope Fund, dedicated to helping elderly people and foster children travel safely for medical or family needs. Kelly served as its youth ambassador, balancing high school classes with speeches and interviews. On weekends, she visited local schools, not as a celebrity, but as a mentor. She told students about courage that didn't come from anger, but from love. Justice, she'd say, isn't about shouting louder than hate. It's about standing long enough that hate runs out of breath. In her debate club, younger students called her Coach Kelly. She taught them how to argue with truth, not ego. One student, shy and nervous, once asked, "What if people don't listen?" Kelly smiled. "They will. Maybe not today, but one day, they'll remember how your voice sounded when you spoke from the heart." Meanwhile, the world hadn't stopped evolving. The Henderson story inspired documentaries, a film adaptation, even lesson plans for civics classes. The moment that once broke the internet now built classrooms. Kelly, however, stayed humble. She still wore the same silver bracelet her grandmother had given her the day of the congressional hearing, engraved with the words, "Stand with grace." Then came the day that changed everything again. Dorothy passed away peacefully one spring morning, her hand resting in Kelly's. The house felt impossibly quiet. Reporters offered tributes. Schools lowered flags in her honor. But Kelly didn't want headlines. She wanted to honor her grandmother the way she'd lived, through service. She returned to Washington a month later, invited to deliver a keynote at the National Human Rights Forum. Standing at the same podium where she had once testified as a child, she spoke not of fame, but of legacy. "My grandmother taught me that kindness is the loudest protest," she began. She believed education was the bridge between ignorance and equality. When I was 12, I defended her dignity. But today, I understand she was the one who taught me what dignity means. The audience rose in a standing ovation before she even finished. Tears filled her eyes, but she smiled through them. I was adopted by two people who changed the world quietly for decades before I ever did. They didn't need cameras to make history. They did it one student, one lesson, one act of love at a time. And that's what I want to keep doing. That speech reached millions online. Within days, schools across the country announced a new curriculum module, the Henderson Principle, Respect as a Practice. Later that year, Kelly received her college acceptance letters, Harvard, Yale, Stanford, all offering full scholarships. She chose Howard University, the same school her grandfather had once dreamed of attending but couldn't because of segregation laws. "I'm finishing what he started," she told reporters. At her farewell dinner, Robert, frail but lucid, took her hand. "You gave the world its conscience back," he said softly. "I can rest easy knowing you'll keep teaching them how to see." Kelly hugged him tight, tears slipping down her face. "You taught me to fight without hating, Grandpa. That's the only way change lasts." When she arrived on campus that fall, she carried no entourage, no cameras, just her grandmother's bracelet, her grandfather's photo, and a notebook filled with plans for her first advocacy project, empathy in education. 5 years after one flight attendant's cruelty, Kelly Henderson had turned a moment of pain into a movement of progress. Her name no longer stood just for a viral story. It stood for every child who found their voice, every elder who reclaimed their respect, and every ordinary person who learned that dignity should never need defending. As she looked up at the night sky outside her dorm window, she whispered a quiet prayer to the heavens that once humiliated her family. "Grandma, Grandpa, we changed the sky.